should have listened to or read through The Man in the Water the first time through. You're supposed to think of yourself as a news reporter, thinking about who, what, when, where, why, and how. Just looking for elements that describe what actually happened. Okay, we know that this is a magazine article. It's a commentary. It's doing a lot more than just telling you exactly what happened. So here are some evidence that I found. He says, as disasters go, this one was terrible, but not unique. Certainly not among the worst on the roster of air crashes. So this was a plane crash, as we found out. It says the unusual element of the bridge, of course, and the fact that the plane clipped it at a moment of high traffic. So I would paraphrase and say, well, there was not only a plane crash, but the plane hit a bridge, and it was during, rush hour, high traffic. There was a location of the event, Washington, the city. So it mentions that as well, that this happened in Washington, D.C. Says elements indifferent as ever brought down Flight 90. So that's another detail telling us it was called, Flight 90. It also mentions that it was Air Florida. Donald Usher and Eugene Windsor, a park helicopter team, risked their lives every time they dipped the skids into the water to pick off survivors. So these were the names of the pilots on this helicopter team who risked their lives. They're part of the WHO. And also the what? Lenny Skutnik, referring to his jumping in the water to drag an injured woman ashore. He talked about that he just felt like he had to do it. So there was a kind of a average Joe person watching this from the Potomac River who jumps into the river, dragged a woman to shore, and you're actually going to see video of that actually take place. The man in the water, he was seen clinging with 5 other survivors to the tail section of the airplane. So it mentions the man in the water. We get a little bit of an idea of who he was, although we don't know his name. And it said that he was clinging with 5 other survivors to the tail section of the plane. It says every time they lowered a lifeline and floating right to him, the man in the water passed it on to another of the passengers. So the man in the water is significant because, Usher and Windsor, the helicopter team, put down this lifeline. Think of it as a life ring that you would see at a pole, right? That you would, throw to somebody who's drowning. And they were doing the same here. And he would get it and he would grab it and give it to the other 5 people instead of taking it from himself. When the helicopter came back for him, the man had gone under because it could only take a few people at a time. We need to also understand that this was winter time. There was a terrible snowstorm. So you can imagine that the Potomac River was very cold. It did mention the Potomac. Okay, so this is what my document looks like. Okay, we already went through the elements, looking at the general overall text, recognizing what the purpose was. Okay, how the writer's craft and structure goes from third person to first person. He starts off telling the story, and then he goes into his own commentary, saying we many times. So what I did here is I used the text evidence here on the left, and I just described the event, just brief paraphrase. Okay, I put up a blast of real winter. It's winter time in the city. You only need to have 3. Okay, so make sure you hit pause if you didn't get some, and add to it here. Here's some of the rest of what I put here. Again, it's good to review this if you're not sure, if you don't quite understand what we just read, what actually happened. But essentially what I would say, to summarize this story, what actually happened is the fact that a plane crashes in Washington, D.C. It hits a bridge in Washington, D.C., and there are some survivors in the river, and there's a helicopter team trying to rescue them, and there's a man in the water who is giving life for other people, and he later dies. There's also a man on the side of the river who jumped into the water and saved somebody. Okay, so there's a couple different things going on at the same time. Now, our next job here is to read this again. Remember that we're trying to identify the main idea and the point of view. So we kind of have the general main idea, but now we're looking for the tone. What is the author's attitude toward a subject? Okay, so we're going to read this again. We just figured out what the basics of this event were, but now we're looking for the tone, since this is a commentary. This is an author giving you his ideas, his thoughts. So we're trying to figure out what is his attitude, what's his main idea, what's his point of view, and why is this culturally significant? When we talk about cultural significance, we mean how is this text important to humanity at this time. And really, you will see that this is kind of universal. It doesn't have to happen at this time. We'll talk about that. So what you should do is you can either replay that audio version again or read it again on your own, and you're going to go in and complete the document right here. So what you should have found out, let me go through some of the text evidence that I found that leads us to the tone, okay? Let me do that first, and we'll come back to the main idea. So what I jotted down is I found right here, it says, and on that same afternoon, human nature, groping and flailing in mysteries of its own, rose to the occasion. And I kind of put that in bold because it provides a very positive tone about man, saying, you know what, man stepped up to the conflict, okay? And again, notice that we don't know who the man in the water is. There's anonymity in how he writes this. Here's the next piece of text evidence. Here, after all, were two forms of nature in collision, the elements and human nature or human character, the elements indifferent as ever brought down flight 90. So it's saying this is very negative about nature. Nature had no emotion. And again, we did this when we read A Quilt of a Country, just looking at the positive and negative tone. And we're seeing a same theme develop that we had from the cold equations, where, nature had no emotion to kill Marilyn. Here's another example. The fact that he went unidentified invested him with a universal character. For a while, he was every man, and thus proof that no man is ordinary. Again, this is positive about man, saying, you know what? Any man can step up. Nobody is ordinary. We can all do extraordinary things. Another piece of text evidence for its part, nature cared nothing about the 5 passengers. Again, it's negative about nature. Nature does not care. So what we want to take a look here is, well, what is his point of view? After you review this, you take a look at, what's positive, what's negative. You should very clearly see that there is a very positive view of man. Okay, very positive view of man. It's focusing on the man in the water and Lenny Skutnik, these guys, and Usher and Windsor, the helicopter pilots, that they're heroes. So his main idea is saying, you know what? We need to focus on the man in the water because that's the title that he gives this text. So what do we learn about the man in the water? Well, the man in the water represents humankind, and he provided hope of what humans are capable. Okay, that is really his main point, that the man in the water is a hero, that he provides hope. This is the best human nature can do. That's how he ends it. He says he was the best we have to offer. Another main idea too, ordinary people can be heroes too. It's not just the man in the water, it's Lenny Skutnik as well. This guy that was observing what was going on and says, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to go in there and save this woman. And also, human beings show their heart while nature is indifferent. It's important to point out that part of what he's saying is that nature doesn't care. Nature is very negative, right? But human beings have a heart. That's what separates humans from nature. It's one of the biggest things, right? We have a soul, we have a mind, we have heart, we have emotion. Nature doesn't care. Okay, so is there a universal character? Well, universal characters, simply characters that embody everyone on the planet, regardless of time, regardless of where, all right, regardless of setting. So it's a character that symbolically embodies well-known meanings and basic human experiences, regardless of where he or she lives and when. Okay, this was in the 1980s, but this is still rings true today. And so is there universal significance? Is it an accepted importance or value that represents human experience, regardless of culture or time period? And absolutely there is, okay? There's absolutely universal significance represented in this story. That's why he says every man, okay? So why is the text culturally significant? Well, it reminds us that humanity can do extraordinary things during extraordinary times. Okay, that's why this is so important. All right, so there is cultural significance. Now, last thing I want to show you here is what the front page of the Washington Post looked like the day after this event back in 1988. It says, this is January 14th, 1982. I'm sorry, not 1988. It says 71 feared dead as plane hits bridge, smashes cars, plunges into Potomac. Here is a couple pictures. Here's a picture of the rescue operation that I showed you in the notes. And here is a picture, I forget her name, who's trying to grapple onto the life ring. You'll notice that there was also a subway train derailment where 3 people died. Here it lists, it says the scene, ice hampers, rescue attempts, a hero, passenger aids others, then dies. That's the man in the water. I've tried to find that article, the full text version, and I can't. A survivor says, we weren't going to make it. And then it talks about the snow, how it paralyzed rush hour. Okay, so that's what actually happened that day. And we're going to continue now, as in future lessons, compare this text to others. So we're reading between and among texts to deepen and refine our thinking and learning. You're going to find out more details of this crash. You're going to find out that not everything was as positive towards humanity. So we determined the tone and we determined the point of view. All right, great job, guys.